Hello, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace, this is Adam Diaz,
Hello.
and we're here to introduce, well, I guess we're not introducing, you guys might know about these topics. We're here to talk about some stuff. We're here to talk about some Scaryish stuff. What's your stuff?
Indeed we are. I'm going to be talking about cursed numbers this episode, and I'm actually pretty excited about it. What are you going to be covering this episode?
Some death rituals I'm really excited about.
I know that you had this concept in mind when you were coming home. You brought it up, and I thought, that is a really good idea. And I don't want to steal your thunder, because I'm sure you worked it into your script, but it came based off of inspiration from a movie, right?
Yep, we watched a movie. I'll talk about it.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. So we were actually going to talk about that movie before we got into our topics. We had decided that when we were watching the movie, we got to bring this up. But now that she's just absorbed it into her topic, I can't mention it. However, we did watch another movie on Father's Day called Iron Mask with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
It was so bad.
And Jackie Chan. And I gotta say, it's probably in my top 5 worst movies I've ever seen. Because you really have no idea who the main character is, because the plot just sort of just keeps changing over and over and over. And they try and tie things together, and it just does not work. Even some of the fighting's okay, but most of it's pretty fucking bad. So
it's just to me, typical old school Chinese movie.
It is, but I feel like the fighting used to be better in old school Chinese movies, or maybe I'm thinking just of Jackie Chan stuff, which is mainly Hong Kong cinema back in the day. But anyways, yeah, if you really want to watch a stinker and have a laugh, it's in 121 minutes, which is 2 hours and 1 minute long. And I know that because I counted every single one of them the entire way through.
I took a nap. I couldn't stay awake.
She 100% took a nap, and she woke up and it was still going. She's like, is this a 3-hour movie? I was like, no, it just feels like it's a 3-hour movie. But it was fun, and my dad enjoyed it, so it was a good time.
No, even he said at the end, he's like, I did not like it.
He enjoys watching bad movies. He always has since I was a kid, so it's fun to watch them with him so that you can sort of make fun of it after the fact, and he likes it when someone else has also seen a bad movie so he can talk about it. But it was a fun time. I will say I'm happy we didn't pay for it, though. So.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm just distracted by your Wheel of Time books over there because they're stacked, and it's the da-da-da-da-da, the da-da-da-da-da, a book that doesn't start with the, and then 2 books under it that start with the. I'm like, why didn't they just put the in front of that title?
I believe the first 4 start with the, maybe the first 5, and then 6 is Lord of Chaos. So that's why.
Ah, okay. Gotcha.
Pretty sure 6 is Lord of Chaos. Yeah, I'm
it's
almost
not
positive.
the Lord of Chaos?
No, it's just Lord of Chaos. Doesn't matter. I'm about to jump from The Great Hunt, which is book 2, into the Dragon Reborn.
What's the first one called?
The Eye of the World.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, also starts with the. Got it.
Yep. So, fun stuff. Little preview of some Wheel of Time stuff coming your way. I'm going to be doing that separately, though. But anyways, we were arguing a little bit before the show. I think I am going to go first this episode.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of excited about that. So, this week, I had the urge to cover something abstract. And I don't mean art by abstract. I mean something that's not tangible, like a haunted building, or even a creature that would be a cryptid or a ghost. And I even thought about doing another episode with the Mandela effect, because that was sort of the idea I had flowing through my head. But I did remember how much people really latched onto the things that they misremembered. And I said, fuck that. I don't want any more tweets or anything like that about how wrong I am. And then I have to explain to them, no, I'm not wrong. This is just the name of that stupid family of bears.
There's some stuff we got wrong, though, with the
Energizer Bunny we got wrong.
Bunny,
yeah, 100%. But there were certain things that people were just no, obviously they made merchandise that was sex in the city.
But that's
so you're wrong.
Brand,
and I was you just bought some knockoff merchandise. That's not my fucking fault. Stop adding me. Anyways, I want to stay in that vein, though. Something similar to that. And a good curse is always really fun. And I think, besides objects, I wanted to go outside of that idea. A curse in general that's not tangible, that seems to pop up every now and then. But I kind of wanted to root it into something. And I was like, well, what else can be cursed? We've done the cursed artifacts thing. But I wanted to see more about, what a curse can do and the fear from a curse. And if we make adjustments within our day-to-day lives just to sort of play it safe. Even people who might not believe in it still are not willing to cross that line, which is sort of what superstition is based out of. But, I said, I think I have an idea here and I'm going to go with it. And I actually think it turned out really well. So without any further rambling explanation, I present to you cursed numbers. So it's interesting because when I first thought of this, I thought there's no way I can make this a full topic. And then I started thinking on it, and I realized there are plenty of cultures that have numbers like this that will fit. And as I kept going, I realized not only is this really accurate, there's scientific studies done based off of the effect some of these numbers have on the people of that culture. So we're going to dive into some of these things, and I find them absolutely fascinating. Another thing I realized when I was making this topic out was that I, for the most part, wanted to avoid the religious side of things, especially the number from my upbringing that was like the forbidden number, which I think a lot of folks that are Christians and especially from the States know is the number 666, which is supposedly the mark of the beast. 666. There's also a bunch of shit that goes into that, and whether it's actually a different number like 999. I know there's all these theories about like inverted 666 is what it's really supposed to be, blah, 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 blah. And I don't want to get into those ones, so I'm like, let's just sort of avoid that. Not going to cover that this episode, so if you're wondering if that's what it's going to be, it is not. Maybe a future Curse Numbers episode, but certainly not this one. I will cover the cultural side of things when it comes to these curse numbers, though, which is kind of interesting to think about when I was considering that a lot of people that listen to the show are not from the United States. And some numbers might carry over, like I'm going to bring up a story near the end, but I think most of them actually won't carry over. And people will be like, wait, what's the significance of that number? But to people from the States, it's like, oh yeah, of course we know that. Like a good example is something we've touched on before, and that's in the English-speaking culture, is the idea that the number 13 is unlucky. And I actually did cover this in the Friday the 13th episode, way back on episode 19, which was 160 episodes ago.
What?
Yeah. So I don't want to have too much overlap there, but like I can just give you the brief explanation that in a lot of the English-speaking and Christian countries especially, the number 13 is considered to be a cursed number or to be unlucky. And a lot of that originates from the fact that Judas was the 13th person to sit down at the Last Supper. And that's the idea, is that he turned out to be the betrayer, and his name is literally synonymous with traitor. Like if you call someone a Judas, you're calling someone a traitor. And that's sort of one of the spots that it originated from. And I covered it on the Friday the 13th episode, but Friday the 13th itself has a bad connotation because of the Knights Templar. They were ordered arrested on Friday the 13th in October of 1307, which you sort of see in Da Vinci Code. If you watch it, you're not exactly sure which pieces of that movie are real and which pieces aren't. That actually did happen. It was the Order 66, so to speak, for the Knights Templar. They were ordered to be arrested, but if they resisted, to be murdered. In most cases, they were all murdered if they resisted. The ones that didn't had the honor of being tortured to death. So after that, Friday the 13th always had this ominous feel to it because these people were supposed to be like some of the closest to God for the longest time. Then all of a sudden they're being murdered and snatched up and tortured.
Well, I know like hotels don't have the 13th floor.
Don't steal stuff from my script.
Okay.
I didn't talk about your movie. You don't talk about my elevators.
Okay. Jesus.
So basically,
sorry, I didn't mean to touch your buttons. Jeez.
Basically, the fear of the number 13 comes quite a bit from religion. So it's not the best example, especially since I just said that I wanted to avoid that. But like Robin is saying, there is a fear of the number 13. There's actually a phobia called triskaidekaphobia, and it's a real thing. People avoid the number 13.
Wait.
That's what it's from. Triskaidekaphobia is one of the most commonly used words in spelling bees to throw people off. There is an I in the word. Just saying, if you watch Letterkenny, you probably get that reference. It's a very long word. But people avoid the numbers. Like Robin mentioned, hotels and high rises especially, the 13th floor tends to be omitted. It goes from 12 to 14. And yes, technically that means the 14th floor is the 13th floor.
But there's no number 13 on the elevator.
There's no number 13 on the elevator. There's also no number 13 in the stairwells. If you're walking up the stairwells and you go an additional floor from 12, it'll say 14 because everything on that floor is labeled 14.
Yeah.
So here's an interesting fact on that, actually, because you hear that and you think, well, how common is that? Well, dear listener, the Otis Elevator Company is one of the, if not the biggest elevator company in the world. It's said that their elevators move 2 billion people a day. That's almost a third of all humans moving on their specific elevators.
That's crazy.
Daily. And if you ask them, how's the elevator business? They say, it has its ups and downs.
God, I hate you.
I just had that, like, it just came to me. I had to spin it off the top of my dome.
Did you really?
I mean, I've heard it a million times, but I didn't have it worked into my script.
Oh.
So, Otis Elevator Company states that up to 85% of the elevator panels that it produces for its units do not have a number 13 on it. It is skipped. So 85% is incredibly common for something that's being put out into the world in all these buildings that need an elevator to not have it on there. So that's a cursed fucking number. People are really afraid of the number 13. Like, you might not go into building an actual structure saying we have to leave off 13 or else everyone's going to die. But you get to 12 and you make the conscious decision to just move on to 14. It's like a tradition based in the culture that the number 13 is to be feared. And similar to that, Asian cultures have a fear of the number 4. Various dialects of Chinese, various dialects of Korean, Vietnamese, Japanese, they all share the same similarity in the word for the number 4 and the word for death. I saw a list, Robin kind of checked it and said, like, that's not quite the dialect of Vietnamese that I'm familiar with, so the word for 4 is very different. But in some cases, the word for 4 is very, very similar or identical to the word for death, which is pretty freaking creepy, and it definitely seems like a bad omen. And there are certain cultural norms that exist based off of that cursed number, just like our obsession with the number 13. If you're gifting someone something that has multiples, like roses or flowers or whatever, or anything like that, you never gift in 4s. You never want it to be in the number 4. If you're
Unless you want a baker's dozen.
That's 13.
Yeah. Fucking donuts. Love that shit.
Okay, I'm talking about the number 4. If you're gonna go low, gift in 3 or 5 if you can. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm just still on
13. Now? Oh man, and I'm hungry. Donuts sound so fucking good right now.
Well, your joke came way too late, dog. So avoid having the number 4 in your street address if you're buying a new house. That's another thing. If you can get a house that's perfect that also doesn't have the number 4 in the address, that's a good omen. We've touched a bit on these things when we cover the superstition episodes, but that similarity makes it quite the unlucky number. And also, elevator panels in the eastern part of the world passed up their curse number as well. There are panels that go 1, 2, 3, 5.
Whoa!
They skip over 4. I'm going to post a picture to our Instagram/Facebook that shows both panels, one from the Western world, one from the Eastern world, both skipping their curse numbers.
Interesting.
I read today that there are certain, albeit rare, high-rises in China where not only is the 4th floor omitted, but the entirety of the 40s are skipped. It goes from 39 to 50.
Wow.
They skip all of the 40s entirely. Even the military in China starts their aircraft numbering with the number 5 to avoid using 4. So if they have like a military designation of a jet or something like that, and it's like, say the American way to do it would be like J-1. They don't do J-1. They don't do J-1 through 4. They start at J-5. To skip over the first 4, because it's 1, 2, 3, 4 that they're skipping, and the number 4 they're also skipping. So they start at 5. That said, this curse number has such a strong effect on the Asian culture, it's not just ingrained in the behavior or the buildings or the military or the people themselves. It has a actual quantifiable effect on the people. So this is a study that I found from the British Medical Journal published in 2001. It's a study that was conducted in the United States over a 25-year period from 1973 to 1998. This shit is crazy, okay? And it is 100% a legitimate study. So on the 4th day of any given month, Chinese and Japanese residents or descendants in the United States are 13% more likely to die of heart failure than the expected rate. Like if there's a baseline, like this is how likely you are to die of heart failure, on the 4th of every month, it's 13% more likely that if you're from China, or if you're a Chinese descent or Japanese descent, you will die on the 4th.
What are the odds that it'd be 13% more?
You want to think of something even crazier?
Baker's dozen.
What 2 numbers are in 13?
Oh, shit!
1 and 3, add them together.
No.
It's number 4.
Get out.
In California by itself, Chinese and Japanese residents were 27% more likely to die of heart failure on the 4th than the expected rate. You want to hear something even crazier? What 2 numbers are in 27? 2 and 7, divide 7 by 2, 3.5 round up.
Yeah.
What number do you get?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking in my head.
You really have to go for a stretch when you get into conspiracy theories
but then you got to think of like the 5. Is 5 automatically rounded up, or does it have to be
automatically
like 5?
rounds up?
Really? Okay.
Yeah. 3.45 would round up to 4.
3.5.
Because 3.45 would round up to 3.5, which rounds up to 4.
Okay, got it.
Doesn't matter. What's very interesting is that the study also shows that the sample ranged
God damn it.
above the expected rate. So if there's a baseline, it's not just 27% flat. Like lower years were 15%. Larger years on the sample were 39% more likely. That is such a significant fucking number. Also, 5 minus 1 is 4. 3 divided by 9 is something. Doesn't matter. Gonna keep going. Also, the control group, which did exist because this is good science, of Caucasians over that same period, had absolutely no peak at any month in a 25-year sample for the 4th day of every month. The study concludes that psychological stress can cause a significantly increased risk for deadly heart attacks. It is real, quite literally, because we have made it real, or it's real because we just noticed it and it's an actual curse. And it's quantifiable through mathematical, like, statistics.
I think people's fear can cause that. Like you're like scared something's going to happen to me today.
Right.
I just feel it. Something's going to happen to me today. So you're stressing yourself out. And then you have a trigger that just like...
You could not be healthy, and then all of a sudden it's the 4th and you're very convinced you're going to die. Also, if you're already in the hospital, you are 47% more likely to die if you're Japanese or Chinese on the 4th day of the month.
Wow.
Than you normally would be of heart defect, or not heart defect, excuse me, deadly heart attack.
You said 47?
47%.
If you multiply 4 by 7, it's 28, and then you divide 8 by 2, it's 4.
Boom, there you go.
Holy
I almost
shit.
put stuff in here about the number 23, but that shit is just way too much for me. And I've also seen the movie Number 23 with Jim Carrey. As much as I love Jim Carrey, that movie is a stinker.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's
not
good.
Scary?
No, I mean, it's like kind of creepy a little bit, but it's just not very good.
Okay.
Also, there's this scene where he's like playing the saxophone. It's like the worst acting I've ever seen, and he's a really good actor most of the time, so I feel like he was just mailing it in. But the fear of the number 4 is a curse that has quantifiable death rates, which is absolutely terrifying if you really come to think about it. Another thing too that I read, I was not sure if I was going to mention this, but when you look at something statistically and you see a spike, you typically see on the very next day an inverse in some way, shape, or form. There's like a compensatory dip where it's because, oh, you just spiked. Well, there's going to be less deaths on the 5th. It did not happen in a single month for the 25-year study.
Wow.
So 25 times 12, figure out that fucking math. It's probably 4 repeated, but it didn't happen one time, which is it's a statistical anomaly that shows that this date of the 4th has an actual effect on people's health. So 4 in this case seems a lot more cursed than 13 to me. It seems like 13 is more commonly known, but that's because I'm from the United States. But what about the numbers that don't have deeply rooted history in a language or in a culture or in a religion? Are there new numbers that currently exist in our current culture that are becoming cursed numbers? So here's a story from my youth. This actually happened, okay? And for those of you who are not from the States, you may not realize the significance of some of these numbers I'm about to bring up, but I will explain them. Some of you are going to hear me say them and be like, oh. And you might have a friend or a wife, in the case of Andrew and Sam, who's just like, what the fuck does that mean?
Oh, yeah.
And I was realizing as I'm typing this, like, we know people that listen to the show who are not going to get this because these are specific numbers to the States. But this is something that actually happened. So when I was a youngin', maybe like 10 to 13, I think I figured out it was probably 10 to 11 is a better range. I was having a sleepover with my cousin. Now, to keep things anonymous, I'm not going to give you names here because I'm not sure if there's any sort of legal proceedings that are tied to this any longer. Pretty sure there were after the fact.
I mean, you got a million cousins. I don't know.
Exactly. So my cousin and I were having a sleepover, and I'm pretty sure it was at my grandparents' house. I'm like 99.9% sure. If it turned out it wasn't, I would be shocked and appalled. We were at my grandparents' house, and my cousin had an older brother who was having a sleepover of his own with his friends at his friend's house. We'll call my cousin's older brother, who's also my cousin, Oldie, because I can't just refer to them both as my cousin because it'll get confusing.
Okay.
So there's my cousin, who I'm with, and Oldie, who's at his own place doing his own thing because he's older. So
Is he really old though?
no.
Okay.
So at some point during this sleepover, we received a phone call from my cousin who's with me, his friend's mom. So the friend's mom got the number to my grandparents' house and called. And so we're like, oh shit, something's wrong. Because she doesn't know my grandparents' phone number. And that was back in the day where not everyone had a cell phone. So acquiring someone's number could be difficult.
I forgot your cell phone the other day.
That's nice to know.
Yeah, I forgot your cell phone number. I was at Walgreens. I was like, I gotta type in this phone number. No.
You suck.
I just...
My friend's, my cousin's friend's mom called and asked, do you know where my son is? To my cousin. And my cousin's friend had not come home from school that day. So his mom was really nervous. Like her son was missing. And my cousin said, no, but maybe he walked to his dad's house. Because he does that sometimes. He decides he's going to go to his dad's house instead.
Yeah, okay.
His parents were split.
I'm scared now because you said there's legal proceedings and stuff.
So
okay.
I would like to pause to tell you, I don't remember the exact details on this, but I'm pretty sure about these parts. And I remember the main beats of the story for sure. So this is basically a family disclaimer because, I mean, none of my fucking family listens to this anyways. But if they're listening, they might be like, that's not exactly what happened. Or I might have gotten something out of order, but this is pretty accurate. So anyways, my cousin says, I don't know where he is. He might be at his dad's. His friend's mom says, thank you for letting me know. And we'll let you know if we find him. So a little bit of time passes by. My cousin is pretty nervous. He really is hoping that we get a phone call that says, hey, we found him. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
So around 10 o'clock, I think, we get a call. And even though we're like 10 or 11 and we don't have a set bedtime like little kids anymore, my grandparents are like, all right, let's fucking pack it in. We're getting pretty tired. But we get a call over there at my grandparents' house. And it's asking us, can we go over to my cousin's house? So now I'm going to flip over and tell you a different perspective of this story. So we were having a sleepover at my grandparents because my cousin's parents went on vacation.
Okay.
My older cousin, Oldie, he was having a sleepover at one of his friend's house. Well, kids do this thing where they say, well, I'm going to go to so-and-so's house. And then that person says, well, I'm going to go to so-and-so and so-and-so's house. So basically everyone says they're going to someone else's house to hide the location that they're really going.
All right.
So the place where they wound up really going was my cousin's empty house because
their parents were
my
on vacation.
aunt and uncle were out of town.
Okay.
I mean, Oldie was a teenager. He was a very young teenager, but he was a teenager, empty house, time to hang out with friends. He was the cool kid in school. He was going to have a party. But it's like a young teenager party where you're just hanging out and saying the F-bomb a lot because no one's going to yell at you, stuff like that. So what had happened was my cousin's friend's mom got super scared because her son hadn't come home and it was pretty late. So she called the police and said, hey, my son is missing. The local police asked her, who was he last seen with? So she told the police he was last seen at school today. And the night before, he was at so-and-so's house and then he came home. So-and-so happened to be my cousin.
Okay.
So my cousin was hanging out with his friend the night before and she just mentions this as he was there last night, but he came home, he went to school today, and then he was missing afterwards.
It's like, so, why would you mention that? Because it has nothing to do with the
They want to know where he's been the last 24 hours.
Okay.
So that would include the previous night. So the next morning rolls around. My aunt and uncle went on vacation. The kids were going to go to their respective sleepovers
okay.
so that the house would be empty. Oldie decides, hey, let's just stay at my parents' house because there's no adults there, no adult supervision. So now that they know all this, the police is like, let's go check that house. So they decide they're going to go to my cousin's house to look for the missing kid.
The one with the party.
Correct. Because they're dumb. So the police show up and they literally break down the fucking door with no search warrant. And they find Oldie and a few of his friends hanging out. And they come in like they're the fucking SWAT team and start detaining and screaming at these teenagers, right? So they were in Oldie's room when all this happened. So when he heard this door being busted down and people screaming, he thought, my house is being broken into. So they freaked out. And the cops come in there, they're screaming, they drag everyone to different rooms, they start questioning them. And my cousin at the time was really into rap. Like Biggie, Tupac, NWA especially. And he used to write stuff like lyrics on his wall. So if anyone heard me say NWA, and you know what one of their most famous singles was, he didn't have that written on his wall, which is fuck the police. He did not have that written on his wall.
Okay.
But the police looked at the wall and they saw the numbers 187 and 420.
420, blaze it up, motherfucker!
That's the one that everyone's probably familiar with, is 420. It's pretty well known. 420 is the United States police officer's code for someone smoking marijuana. You're calling in the code to dispatch to say, someone's smoking marijuana. That's what I'm investigating. You use the code 420. So you don't have to say someone's smoking marijuana. You just use the code. So that's kind of like a forbidden number. 187 is also a forbidden number.
Is it?
In the United States.
What is it?
And I'll get to it. So there are actually police codes for everything here, for all the crimes in the United States. So they see that and they immediately want to know where the weed is. Because clearly this is a party at this house. There's got to be weed here. And there's nothing there. They're not going to find anything, but they're pressuring these young kids. They're freaking them out. But multiple cops stay in my older cousin's bedroom. And they ask him, what's that number? And they point at 187. And he tells them, it's 187. And they ask him, what does that mean? And he says, murder. Because 187 is the police code for murder specifically.
All right.
So he has it written on his wall because it's in fucking lyrics. And he decided he's going to put it there. So the police then start questioning Oldie about what he has done with my cousin's friend. They decide at this point to question, I think he was 13 or 14 years old.
He's a kid.
A 13 or 14-year-old on why he kidnapped his little brother's best friend and where the kid is. And then they tear the fucking house apart because they become convinced that this kid is in the house.
But there's no evidence.
At all.
Okay.
Except scared kids. During this, they call my aunt and uncle who are on vacation and say, hey, we're at your house. We believe your son has kidnapped so-and-so. I don't know what the kid's name was. And it becomes a big deal. Not only do they make it seem like Oldie has kidnapped this kid, but they tell my aunt and uncle, and this is a bit hazy. They might have actually told my grandparents this when we arrived, but they tell them that all the kids there were smoking pot, despite there being no weed smell and no weed found, no evidence whatsoever, no paraphernalia.
They could have tested them. Yeah,
they could have done all this stuff. They're basically fucking lying to my aunt and uncle, or my grandparents, I can't remember which, but they also mentioned that Oldie had the number 10999 on his wall. Not 187, 10999. 10999 is a different code. And they state that when they asked him, what is 10999, he told them it's for killing cops.
What?
Which he never fucking said to them. Total fabricated bullshit. 10999 is for officer down. And they said that was on his wall. It's not on his wall. Like, you just walk into his room. It's not like he fucking erased what he had written on his wall. You'd still fucking see it there.
Yeah.
They asked him about 187, so when they told them that, they're like, what the fuck is happening? So my aunt freaks out.
And he's just a kid. He's just a kid. Just a
my aunt freaks out.
Teenager.
Calls my grandmother. My grandmother, my grandfather grab me and my cousin. They pack us into the car. We go over there because we're under the impression that they're looking for my cousin's friend. And my cousin's freaking out because they keep saying my cousin's friend has been kidnapped now. Like, they're convinced he's been kidnapped and they're looking for him. But he also knows that his brother didn't fucking do it. And they're idiots for looking at his house. I remember walking in and they did allow Oldie, my older cousin, to call my aunt. So he gets to finally call his mom to confess his sins.
Is he like crying the whole time?
He's freaking the fuck out. I remember very, very distinctly him having a screaming conversation where he's begging his mom to believe him. And she did, because she's fucking awesome. But I remember him screaming like, I didn't do this and I didn't do that. I distinctly remember screaming like, I wasn't smoking any pot. Like, just screaming like he doesn't know what the fuck is happening. It's like the worst night of his life. And the cops just stood there and they acted like that he was fucking guilty. Like they had stumbled onto the scene of a crime and they're just waiting for everything to like come together. And the kid was at his fucking dad's house. He was at his dad's house the whole time. The mom called there. They didn't answer because they were out doing something together. They came home. They sat around. No one drove over there. No one went to the house until the mom eventually went to check. And there he fucking was.
Wow.
So it's like, it was fucking crazy.
I would sue the police so fast.
It was a big deal. That's why I'm like, I'm not sure, like, if there's still litigation going on. Pretty sure that there absolutely was charges filed for destruction of property, illegal entry, like all that shit. And like, my cousin was traumatized. Not in the way where you're like, oh, like I'm so scared. He was fucking pissed for a very long time, which he absolutely should have been. But those numbers, I remember being like, you shouldn't have written that shit on your wall. Like, everyone knows those numbers are going to get you in trouble. And if he would have had 666 on his wall, I guarantee you they would have called him a Satanist and been 100% convinced that he murdered that kid, not just kidnapped that kid. They ripped their fucking house apart looking for that kid. It was fucking crazy. And it was all attached to the fact that they went in there, they found these kids, and they looked at the wall and they saw numbers that pissed them off. And they're like, now we're going to be even worse to these fucking kids. And all they had to do was just go send a fucking car to check the kid's dad's house, and they would have found him.
If they tore the house apart, they would have been ruining evidence anyway. If someone was murdered there, like, you're messing up all the, you know what I mean? Like,
it was fucking insane. But, like, I think back on that, and I'm like, those numbers are like forbidden numbers, you know? Like, imagine how much time goes by where the number 187 is associated with murder, or the number 420 is associated with smoking weed, which no one gives a fuck about anymore. It's like,
right? No one
cares.
Within our vicinity, there's like 4
the state where this took place, it's still a forbidden number. The state to their north, east, west, and south, it's not a forbidden number anymore. It's probably the jingle for the number that you call at the dispensary you want to go to.
Oh, my sweet baby Jesus.
So that's one that I remember from my youth of a cursed number. But now, before I wrap this up, I have a bizarre story from Bulgaria. All right. So if I were to ask you what you think a cursed phone number would be, you would probably associate it with the number 666 being in there, or all sixes or something like that.
Yeah.
Or if you really hate that one song, you probably say 8675309 was a cursed phone number.
What's that?
It's a song called 8675309.
Really?
You just have to listen to it. I'm pretty sure the chick's name is Jenny, by the way.
Can you call that number?
I'm pretty sure if there's area codes in front of it, they still give it out, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, anyways, in Bulgaria, though, you may give the number, if I say, hey, give me a cursed phone number, 0-888-888-888. And to those outside the country that need to dial in with the country code, you would dial 359-888-888-888, because 359 is the country code for Bulgaria. You would, that is, if the number was still in service. It no longer is. So, by the way, this could kind of be bullshit, but I found a lot of articles also linked to these things I'm about to tell you actually happened on actual dates, and this is real. So, back in 2001, there was a man named Vladimir Grashnov. I think I'm saying his last name right. Vladimir was the CEO of Mobitel, which was a Bulgarian mobile phone company. And he had contracted a very aggressive cancer that he had been battling for quite some time. It had been speculated that this cancer was given to him, and this is speculation, it likely just developed on its own, but folks believed, to this day in fact, that he was poisoned with radioactive material or radioactive waves by a business rival looking to take over his company, which is where his cancer came from. But on October 9th, 2001, he died of cancer. He was 48 years old.
Oh, wow.
So, also on October 8th, the day before he died, it was announced by the media that he needed a blood transfusion, but apparently was being refused, according to these local media outlets. I found these articles where people were just outraged. Most of the people were his family. His wife couldn't believe the, quote, bad attitude, end quote, towards him while on his deathbed because a blood transfusion may have helped save his life.
Wow.
His number, though, 888 times 3, spent some time unassigned, but then eventually was issued to a man named Konstantin Dimitrov. I think I'm saying his name right. It might be Dimitrov. He was a young Belgian businessman. I think he was like 33. But he had a hotel that he owned and some other residential properties. Aside from that, his main business was supposedly he was a mobster. And not just a mobster, but a mafia boss of the Eastern European Mafia, which is something to accomplish at such a young age. And he didn't have the number for very long because on December 6th, 2003, he was sitting in Dam Square in Amsterdam enjoying a meal with a model. I saw her name. And model is probably not the appropriate name for her because she was actually his mistress, because that was not his wife.
Ah.
And while he was sitting there enjoying his meal, he was supposedly actually in Amsterdam to inspect his like $800 million drug laundering or drug trafficking business.
Okay.
While sitting there, he was shot in the back of the head.
What the French toast?
By an assassin. The bullet actually exited through his face and hit his girlfriend, who did not die. The assassin was eventually caught, tied to a different Bulgarian mafia boss who left the country the day before this happened, who never went back. The assassin wound up getting 18 years in jail. And then the number again would basically be taken out of service before being given to another person. And this person's name was Konstantin Dishliev. Yes, I checked. These are all real people. All these things actually happened.
So there's 2 Constantines?
And there's 2 people named Constantine that get this phone number. The second and the third owner. So Dishliev was said to be a crooked businessman, So all three of these people have some shady dealings going on in their background, which really makes me think that the businessmen in Bulgaria are very similar to the businessmen in the States, where they're all just shady as fuck. I'm not sure what Dishliev's business was, but it is said that his side business was trafficking close to $130 million in cocaine.
Hot.
He was in Sofia, which is the capital of Bulgaria. I think it was 2005, in fact. He was outside an Indian restaurant when he was, you guessed it, shot to death. So after the third person in 5 years had passed away suddenly and in very public view, it became very, very well known that this single phone number connected these three people. And very quickly, everyone assumed that whoever got that number next would die. And
they didn't test it?
It was considered to be a cursed number at that point. Did you just ask me if they tested it?
Yeah.
Like, did they just transfer it to someone just to see if they would die?
Yeah.
I feel like they had already done that twice.
Okay.
So it was decided that that number would be completely taken out of service, and it's not used whatsoever anymore. And it's not like the number 888-888-888 forced someone to join the mafia or traffic cocaine. It's just something that they had actually done, but they wound up with that number, and then their untimely death followed. This one actually kind of reminded me of that cat that visits people in the hospital like right before they die.
Oh, yeah.
And then they slowly start to postulate that it's when people are really sick towards the end of their lives.
Your temperature rises and the cat wants to be warm.
Precisely.
So, yeah.
So like there's like correlation but not causation. But when it came down to it, it's like the number was so worrying to people that were going to be getting new cell phone numbers soon that no one wanted it. They're like, just completely take it out of circulation. And it is 100% considered to be a cursed number now.
Interesting.
It's not just like a number based out of, fear or police code or culture or anything like that.
It's just a cursed
It's
phone
a literal phone number that passed between three people who would die in tragic and sometimes absolutely brutal ways. So I was like, this is the epitome of what an actual cursed number is.
It's crazy. And
it's just crazy to think that like it just started in 2001. It started with like this fucking guy who owned a phone empire dying, and then his number went to someone else and his number went to someone else. So it's like curses don't technically have origins that are always so far back in the past. Like I think we associate because of like TV or movies, where they're always rooted in something typically
ancient,
exactly. Yeah. Like sometimes things can start. I had a friend who used to say like, you can just start a tradition at any point that can become a tradition through your family or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like he bought a pocket watch at one point. And he's like, I could have this pocket watch for the rest of my life. I could pass it on to my kid. He could pass it on to his kid. It's like, they'll never know I bought it from Kohl's for $10. But it's
That's fucked up.
He could start an heirloom somewhere, just like a curse can kind of just start up anywhere. But I think what really feeds into curses is people's fear of the fact that it actually might be real. And in some cases, like the number 4, it kind of does make it real in general. So as I was going through these, I thought they're absolutely fascinating. And I decided that I was going to make this my topic and share it with you folks. So I hope you folks enjoyed it. That was Cursed Numbers.
Thank you. That was great. Did you ever watch a movie? I forget what the movie's called, but it's about getting phone calls, and when you answer the phone, you hear...
Have 7 days.
No. Although we did watch that movie again the other day. You hear your death. Like, you hear when you die. Like,
no, I've never watched this movie.
Yeah. It's really... Oh, man, I wish I remembered what it was called. It was probably something... The word call has to be in it,
Someone
right?
will definitely comment on the Facebook and let us know.
But you answer the phone and you hear yourself screaming or whatever because it's your murder or your freakish accidental death or some shit. Oh, man. I want to watch that movie.
I'm putting a lot of stuff together right now, actually, when it comes to numbers. The number 4 is in this episode, 184. Also, the number 8 from 888-888-888 is in this episode. And if you add 1, 8, and 4 together, it's 13. That's pretty fucking crazy. I did not realize that until just now.
Wow.
So if you listen to this is the cursed episode.
Oh, God.
Let's hope
Wait,
not.
what's this episode number?
184.
Get the fuck out.
Why do you think I just pulled those numbers out of my ass?
I just thought because you were covering this episode and you had the phone number in it. That's 888-888.
No, this is episode 184.
And then you have the, oh my God. And then the
yeah, it all connects, right?
Holy, no.
Also, 8 minus 4
Did you do this on
is
purpose?
still 4. No.
What? That's terrifying.
Yeah,
That's
I agree.
fucking terrifying.
So
because the number 4 is, a bad number. No.
4, 8, and 13 are all associated with this episode.
This is a cursed number. This is a cursed episode. I can't with this shit right now.
All right. Well, let's see what else, what other effects this episode has on the other side of this commercial break.
I'm scared now. Why? All right. Welcome to the other half of this cursed episode. I'm going to be covering death rituals today. I feel like this episode is just fucked up. Okay. So, we watched a movie this weekend. Like Adam was saying, we watch a lot of movies, but we watched a movie this weekend called The Vigil. It's on Hulu. Totally recommend it if you haven't watched it yet or heard of it. The whole story of the movie revolves around this Jewish ritual of a vigil.
Honestly, when we started it too, we're like, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah.
And it was just based off the tradition that we weren't very familiar with.
Right.
And I think there was an expectation, at least on my part, that it was going to be some like piece of crap C horror movie.
Yeah.
Direct to video, not very good.
But it was a good horror
I couldn't
movie.
read my book because I kept looking up to watch this thing. And it was very good.
Yes, it was a very good movie. So the whole thing with the vigil is after someone dies, their body is never left alone until it's time to bury them. And traditionally, a family or close friend stands vigil over the one who's died. Historically, it's like a form of guard duty to prevent the desecration of a body prior to burial. Obviously, that's not as big a thing now. Like, no one's going to come into your house and desecrate someone, right? But it's a sign...
I mean, we hope.
We hope. But it's a sign of respect for the dead and, like, the idea that you're not abandoning them before they're buried. The watchers are encouraged to pray, meditate, or read spiritual texts, etc. It's also not out of the ordinary to pay someone to perform this duty, which is what happens in the movie. At least from what I can research on the internet, it's you can pay someone to do it. So please let us know if you practice any of the death rituals that I'll cover in this episode, or if there are some rituals that you think we should research, because this is definitely going to be like Death Rituals 1.
I think, too, that the most fascinating part of this is that we get to explore other folks' cultures and learn more about it. And it's like, it's kind of morbidly fascinating, and I understand that that's like kind of like uncouth, but it's not meant to be offensive. It's meant to be respectful. And also, like a lot of stuff in the religions that we know or are familiar with, is also crazy or kooky or weird or creepy in some way.
I just think it's really educational because you get to look into how other cultures kind of think and operate and believe. And it's really, because it's so much different than your own, you know? So
I know several people in my life that have researched other religions that grew up Christian, and they found some of the similarities so close and some of the rituals so fascinating and like heartfelt that they just converted.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they like, it's not like they abandoned their previous religion. They still practice a lot of things from the religion that they were raised with, that they were most familiar with, but they really wanted to include these other pieces of religion into their lives because they found them so like important. They really did. They connected with them in a spiritual way. And I think that's sort of our fascination with like, wow, I didn't even know that. Like, I want to learn more about it.
Yeah. But yeah, so, I mean, watching this movie, that's how I felt. I was like, this is crazy. This is intense. Really good horror movie. Y'all should watch it. But this movie revolves around this ritual. It's pretty interesting. But we're not just here to talk about the practice of vigils. I didn't actually think I was going to go into detail of that whole thing, but it fit in with the topic, so that's fine. I'm going to be covering a number of different unique death rituals from around the globe. Death ritual / funeral type
last rite
ceremonies.
Type things.
Yeah. So the first one I'm going to tell you guys about is the practice of self-mummification. Self-mummification, also known as Soku Shinbutsu. And it's this practice in which Buddhist monks kind of withdraw themselves from the world and abstain from typical, human activity. And they kind of focus purely on pursuing their spiritual goals.
Didn't one of the Dalai Lama do that?
Yes. I don't know. Yes?
I'm not sure it was one of the
that.
Dalai Lama. I just know that there's... Okay, you're probably going to talk about this in a second, so I'll shut up.
So these people do this to the point of death. Like, they enter this state of mummification while they're still alive. Which is weird, right? Kind of a crazy notion, but it has been seen in cases in different Buddhist communities and countries that kind of practice these different things. Supposedly, there is a real-life self-mummified corpse that exists in the world. There's supposedly a few of them, actually. There's a 550-year-old one, and it's the mummy of a Buddhist monk named Sangha Tenzin that resides in the northern Himalayan region of India. It was actually rediscovered in 1975 when this big, like, hemispherical structure that was, like, protecting it collapsed. So they had to, sift through there and found it. This particular mummy is similar to others that have been found in Tibet and East Asia. It's because of the air. So the air up there, I guess it's not as humid and stuff as down here, right? Plus it's cold. So the mummy, it's like able to be preserved without any preservatives or anything for 500 years.
I remember hearing about this in my Religions of the East course in university, and there was a Buddhist monk, and it's probably the same one, who entered into that state of self-mummification while trying to achieve nirvana. And he was said to have been like one of the closest individuals to ever come to achieving nirvana. And they were convinced, because it was still there, that he was actually still alive. And that he had actually achieved nirvana despite the fact that he was mummified. And they insisted, like, go ahead and test him with, like, whatever you have. And you'll probably find stuff that you cannot explain because we sincerely think he's still alive. And although they were able to prove, like, most of what they could test was, like,
is he still alive?
Dead organism, they're like, we don't know because we cannot, like, basically cut him open.
Because if he's still alive,
center,
like, oh god.
Like, of it, but they're like, if he's just pure energy now, that would be in the very middle of, like, the mummy. It was bizarre and absolutely fascinating.
That'd be fascinating to look into.
But, like, he basically was so close to nirvana, he was like, I'm just going to self-mummify myself right now so that I can, like, shed my earthly form and move on.
Yeah.
But that's just a completely different topic in general that I am definitely not intellectually prepared to talk about. It's been a long time since I studied Buddhism or any of the other religions of the East.
I'm not getting super deep into the religion or anything here. I'm strictly in for the self-mummified bodies. Okay, so according to Paul Williams, who wrote a book on Buddhism, the practice was likely inspired by Kukai, who is the founder of the Shingon Buddhism, like, sect of Buddhism. And that's actually one of the major schools of Buddhism in Japan. Kukai ended his life by reducing and eventually stopping his intake of food and water while continuing to meditate and chant, which, like you're saying, the whole point is to reach a sense of enlightenment and nirvana, things like that.
Like ascendancy is the goal.
Yes. So, in medieval Japan, a monk completed over around 3,000 days of this practice on a strict diet they called the mokujiki, or eating like a tree. And what it was is, like, you eat pine needles, resins, seeds. You pretty much want to eliminate all the fat from your body because that's what makes you decompose and stuff, right? So thanks for that tip, because I could use some losing of fat. Maybe I'll eat some pine needles and seeds.
I would recommend not using self-mummification as a diet fad. So
they pretty much starve themselves, then reduce their liquid intake, dehydrating their body and shrinking their organs down. Some would drink a poisonous tea made from a tree similar to poison ivy. This would then cause them to vomit and then remove even more fluid from their bodies. So they're just trying to get rid of as much liquid in your body as possible. Dry yourself out, which is, how you would mummify yourself, I would assume. I don't know.
My experience with mummification is strictly with Brendan Fraser as my guide, so
you have no idea how many websites I went to that were talking about this, and they had to bring up the mummy. Okay, but eventually these people cut out all fluids completely. They just stopped drinking anything. Shugendo monks would then be, quote-unquote, ready for the next step. So when they're ready, they tell someone, hey, I'm ready to move on. They then get buried alive. Not in the typical way you think of being buried alive, right? They would be lowered into a box that's underground. This box is lined with charcoal. They sit down into this box in the lotus position. And then they have a breathing tube to the air above the box. So they have air down there. They're just underground now. So they're sitting there in their lotus position. They're meditating, they're chanting, they're praying. And
this is terrifying. There's like so many of my phobias wrapped into one.
Each day they would ring a bell while they're down there. And supposedly, they kind of become these naturally preserved mummies with their skin and their teeth intact, with no decay or requiring of any preservatives. So when the bell stops ringing, then the monks above are like, well, he's dead now. And then they wait another 1,000 days, after which the body is then brought back up and then checked for any signs of decay. So it's pretty intense that you're just waiting all this time to see, you know, what if it's a pool down there? You know what I mean?
It's gross.
But you never know. So these mummies, if you're able to successfully do this, they become revered symbols of this religion, right? There's an altar in the Honmyoji temple in the Yamagata prefecture in northern Japan that preserves one of the oldest mummies. In that prefecture, there's actually about 13 of these mummies, these self-mummified monks. There's maybe about 16 of these self-mummified monks left in Japan. The whole point of doing this, it's just the belief that you would reach enlightenment. That's why somebody would go through that just to get there, right? In Japan, this practice is now illegal because it's gruesome, absolutely, and it's absolutely excruciating to go through.
Right.
I think at some point, like in the 1950s or something, I forget what date it was, but they outlawed like assisted suicide and things like that.
I was going to say, it sounds like assisted, like euthanasia type stuff.
Right.
So that would make sense.
Also, there are a number that have attempted to do this and have ended up dying like any normal person would die. And they end up not being preserved at all. So it's just like you're literally just killing yourself trying to do this. I know I talked a lot about Japan, but the practice does stem to other parts of East Asia. It just, a lot of sources say that it started in Japan with that one person. There's a somewhat famous mummified monk in Thailand, and there's a Chinese monk that is actually inside a 1,000-year-old statue. Supposedly the statue got moved around to a bunch of different countries too. Like it got stolen or something by some country and then brought to a different, it was really weird. And then fun geeky notes, in Breath of the Wild, the monks in the shrines are kind of supposed to be based off of these.
I was wondering if that's what that was.
Yep. And then in Shin Megami Tensei, Daisojo is also like supposed to be themed after
FYI,
these.
Those two things, Shin Megami Tensei and Breath of the Wild, are video games.
They're video games.
For those of you who don't know.
Yeah, so it's just crazy how it's inspired a bunch of stuff. That's just a couple of the nerdy things. It's inspired other things too. Okay, so that's self-mummification, right? The next one I'm going to tell you guys about is the sky burial. Now, before I get into this next topic, I want to make sure that you folks know there's a trigger warning for this one. It's pretty gruesome. It's pretty rough. So if you don't want to listen to this one, you could probably skip to the end of the episode. So yeah, trigger warning for that one. It's morbid. So I don't know if you folks have heard of this before, but the first time I heard about it was on the hit TV show Bones.
Of course.
I don't actually know if it's a hit TV show. I don't know. All I know,
it lasted for quite a few seasons, so I would imagine it would have been considered a hit at some
10
point.
Seasons.
10 seasons is a lot of seasons.
But I watch a lot of Bones. In this show, Emily Deschanel, Bones, states that she wants to have a sky burial. And this totally sets Booth off, David Boreanaz, or however you say his last name. Her husband.
Well, spoilers for anyone who just started Bones.
Whoops. If you haven't watched it, it's so old. Okay, it doesn't matter. But he gets upset that she would want to do something so disturbing instead of having a normal, usual, not normal, but
I was going to say normal in quotes. Normal to him. Normal
to him. But like a usual, typical funeral, right? Because he's Catholic. Because it's like you have a kid and you're going to do that to her. Like, what are you thinking? And so he gets really pissed, but, as I tell you guys about what this sky burial thing is, you'll understand why someone would be like, what the fuck? Why would you do that? Okay. Our show isn't about TV recaps, though we tend to do that a lot with movies and TV. I'm going to tell you what these burials are. It's kind of terrifying. All right. So the sky burial, when translated from the original Tibetan term, kind of translates to bird scattered. Okay.
So it's just like, okay, I'm seeing, like, in my head, I'm picturing standing on a cliff and chucking someone's ashes out. I'm getting the feeling like that's not going to be the case.
So I'm sure in your minds, you guys are like, bird scattered? What's that mean? This little death ritual / funeral practice.
I think I just realized what this is, come to think of it.
Involves placing a corpse up on a mountaintop and leaving it to decompose completely exposed to the elements. The entire time, your body gets scavenged by animals and carrion birds.
This is what they do to Corvo in the Magician episode of Solar Opposites.
Yes.
That's why they're disappointed that they only have one vulture.
Yeah, so carrion birds are like vultures, hawks, crows, things like that.
Anything that will eat a decomposing body.
Yeah. It's practiced in different parts of East Asia, places like Tibet, Mongolia, and India. Interesting. Oh, and China. Interesting enough, is it's involved in a different sect of Buddhism, actually. When I was going through these, I was like, why? Why is this so weird? Okay, so the Vajrayana Buddhist tradition considers these places for sky burial as charnel grounds, kind of like cemeteries. They're sacred places to do this, right? The majority of Tibetan people and many Mongols adhere to that sect of Buddhism. And they believe in the transmigration of spirits. So because the spirits move on, there's really no need for the preservation of that body. And it's pretty much like just an empty meat sack, you know? So by doing this, it's kind of like giving back to nature. That's the whole idea. This form of burial seems to have evolved from ancient Tibetan practices. They used to deflesh their corpses.
Say that one more time.
They used to deflesh their corpses.
You're not reading that word wrong. No. It's supposed to be like deathlish.
No.
Where it's translated to something that's not taking the skin off. Yeah,
there's evidence of this, right? So there's evidence of this, like ancient practice. Are you okay? You're rubbing your tummy like you're not feeling so hot.
I wasn't feeling hot before the show, so this is definitely like causing a physical reaction from me right now.
So yeah, some think that it came about because of practical reasons for the time. Of course, it could be something ceremonial, similar to what the sky burial is now. There's even supposed evidence of sky burials having been conducted at Stonehenge, apparently. I had no idea. But I would believe that because it's like this big ceremony. They found bones
in so many spots at Stonehenge, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it's like, it's this spiritual place, you know? When it comes to Tibet, most of it is above the tree line. So there's not a lot of wood for cremation. And the ground is really rocky. So it's not easy to bury someone underground. Normally in Buddhism, you see a lot of cremation. And like they were talking about in Japan, right? So it's really hard to not be able to do the normal things that you would normally do. So they've evolved in a way to try to...
I think, like, I know when we went to Japan, this is what Robin was referencing, is that we went on a tour and they mentioned how small Japanese cemeteries are because you are not legally allowed to be buried in Japan because of the scarcity of land. Your family has a headstone and you are cremated, and then some of your ash is put underneath your family's headstone along with your relatives and ancestors.
Yeah, something like that.
So I think it's not even like they're evolving past something. They took a different path based off of the region they were in.
Right. That's what I mean by evolving. Like,
yeah, I totally get you.
With their area. Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting too because a lot of these things people don't know about until it's popularized and like.
I guess more adapting, not really evolving.
I think things get popularized in pop culture, like Viking funerals, where they put you on a boat, they push you out into a lake.
That's a different death ritual for a different episode.
They shoot a fucking arrow that's on fire.
Set you on fire.
Onto your boat, and that's like your Viking funeral, which are starting to become popular again in different parts of the world.
I want that.
A lot of people want that.
JK LOL, you'll never launch that arrow far enough to get me.
So I won't save this till the end of your topic then. What I want is to be cremated, and then I want everyone to take a fistful of my ashes from my funeral and find someone I didn't like when I was alive
Chuck you in their
and
face.
throw my ashes in their eyes. 'Cause I want them to know that I'm burning their eyes one more time. Like, it's one last fuck you.
I want to be pressed into a diamond. A cursed diamond.
I like how it would have to be cursed if you were pressed into a diamond.
I want to haunt someone, man.
Or I could be one of those tree pods. Where you
a tree pod would be cool. The
come
only
back as a haunted tree.
Okay, so the only the only downside to being a part of a haunted forest is that you're stuck there. You know.
What if you become an ent? How fucking sweet would that be?
That'd be fucking sweet. An ent is like a walking, talking tree. If you guys did not know. Okay. Anyway.
Tangent.
Regardless of the reason why these sky burials used to be done, now it's looked as a symbol of the impermanence of life, right? At the same time, it sustains the living creatures around them. So it's a mix of generosity and compassion, which are some really important aspects of Buddhism. So it's a little mix of everything, right? Because your spirit's moved on. Your body's just this bundle of flesh. You might as well feed nature around you. So how would it work in general terms? As not everybody does it the same way, is this. So the monks would chant and burn incense around the deceased, often taking place like the day before you're going to be put out there, right? And then you would be put out there. A monk would kind of disassemble the body, which is probably the nicest way to put that.
Disassemble like what serial killers do to get rid of their victims?
Yeah, sure. Supposedly, this isn't done in a very somber way. It's more of a nonchalant, talkative, social way because it's supposed to help the soul move on easier by not having everyone be sad and depressed, you know. Some accounts have organs and stuff like that removed and processed separately, as well as the hair, even though all the birds and stuff are going to eat that anyway. Some hair is supposed to be kept in a room in the monastery as well.
They have a hair room.
A hair room. Maybe it's just, you know how people have like little curls of hair sometimes?
No.
Is that just
like when you cut like a lock of hair off of a celebrity's head and put it in a baggie to
No.
worship?
Like, I guess a long time ago in more olden, like Victorian days, like say you had someone that died, you have a little lock of their hair, like you cut off a lock of their hair. And
I've never seen that before.
Yeah, some people do that. I don't know if people do that anymore. They used to. So
that's what would reside in the hair room, is what you're saying.
Yeah. So maybe, I don't know how much they keep. I just assume it's a little. You can't have a lot of hair, you know? That would pile up real quick. I mean, look at the house. Okay, hair piles up real quick. So once that stage is done, the body is left for the vultures until just bones remain. And then after the bones are broken, you know, just cleaned, they're broken up, ground up, and then turned into like a buttermilk tea mixture. And they give it back to the birds. They don't make people eat it. Adam's looking at me like that is very disgusting.
Like, you've made me drink some weird fucking teas, man.
No, they make this mixture kind of like a soup, oatmeal type soup type thing for the birds to eat.
I thought it was going to become like some concrete paste or something.
No. Yeah, it's like this paste for the birds to eat. That's it. Not for you to eat. Some say...
You can't tell me what to do. I'll eat bone paste if I want to.
It's glue. Go eat some glue. That's some bone paste. Horse hoof paste. Anyway, so some say that when there are instances of multiple bodies that are laid out in that around the same area, the birds sometimes need to be coaxed into eating because there's so much to eat. You know what I mean? They have to get coaxed into it. They're full already. They have to, not the birds, the people have to perform like this ritual dance to coax the vultures down. It's really weird, but if the body is left untouched, it's considered a sign of bad luck or like a bad omen, according to some Buddhist beliefs. Maybe that person had bad karma in their life or in their past lives that led them to have like a bad rebirth.
I hear that grumpy people are the ones that animals don't want to eat the most. Do you know why?
Why?
Because they're so salty.
Jesus fuck. Oh my god. So it's better to be in a place with less bodies kind of offered up. Sometimes vultures would have to be fended off with sticks during preparation because you're the only one there, you know. So these birds are like, finally, some food. We need this. Scary part is, some say if too many corpses are left in one certain burial site, ghosts may appear. Which in itself is a new type of fear entirely. Like, this whole thing, like getting buried this way is, to me, because it's not my culture, very barbaric.
I feel like buried should be in quotes.
Yes.
I won't go out of my way to call this barbaric because I think if you were to explain most burial or last rite rituals to someone who's never heard of them before.
Oh, like how we like shove people into a fire?
Oh, it's like, well, there's the fire thing is one thing, but the other thing is like, well, you know, we keep them around and then we embalm them and we tell like how we do that, which most people don't even want to think about because it is horrific.
Yeah.
It's like so that we can all come and look at them and in some cases talk bad about them one last time. We try to keep
Have you ever done that?
I've never talked bad about someone at a eulogy. No. But there are some wakes and funerals that just don't go well because of family drama and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Like, some people show up to, like, take one last swing at a casket. Like, that'll happen. But it's like, it's not the norm, but it's definitely not something that's, like, never happened before.
Okay.
I'm just saying, like, if you explain that ritual, which is the one I'm most familiar with, to someone who's never heard of it before, they might be like, it seems like it's not that efficient. You know?
Yeah.
It seems kind of barbaric to do something like that. But at the same time, to us, it's completely normal. Sky burial, to me, doesn't seem like a burial. It seems like sky scattering. Almost.
Which is why it's called bird scattering.
Yeah, that makes more sense. That's a better term.
Yep.
So
sky burials were initially looked at as a primitive superstition. The governments of China and Mongolia looked at it as a sanitation concern, which it understandably is. And because of this, they closed a lot of temples, and China even outlawed the practice at one point. It definitely still is in metropolitan areas. Due to this ban, bodies started getting sent down rivers. Like, people just started chucking them in rivers and stuff. So, in rural areas...
The half Viking funeral, where they're just throwing them into the river.
Because they can't bury them underground, and they can't burn them. There's no trees. You know what I mean? They can't dig up all them rocks. So that's what they did. You just chucked them in rivers. So in rural areas, they still practice the sky burials, but you can understand why this practice isn't as popular as it is, as it was probably back then. But people still do it. You can't really practice something like this in an urban area, though. You know, like a metropolitan area. That's just not something that's feasible because you don't want a bunch of vultures in your city, you know.
Especially a bunch of vultures that might drop human remains as they're flying
people.
off with them. Yeah.
Vultures are actually a protected animal in the Republic of China. At least certain species are. Some are considered rare or threatened on their list of protected wild animals, which I find to be interesting because I don't think there are, like, rare vultures here, are there?
I don't know.
I
just know of the turkey vulture.
Which one's that one?
The one that I grew up around.
Is that the super ugly one?
I feel like they're all super ugly. If we have any vultures that are listening, we apologize.
Well, this prevents anyone who has died of infectious disease or toxins.
I was going to say, that's my biggest concern.
To be buried this way because they don't want
spreading it.
They don't want the vultures getting sick.
Yeah.
Because they're protected animals. So,
I'm more thinking about the humans right now and the possibility of like a crossover event. Well, yeah, but like if they shit on something that someone then
I could
eats.
See that, yeah.
I've seen Contagion, man. Like, I know how this shit plays out.
Jesus. So it's, you know what's funny is I'm reading a manga right now. And
why are you whispering?
Sorry, I'm reading a manga right now.
Is this just a secret just between us girls?
And it started a while back, and it's talking about like people should wash their hands and you should wear a mask so you don't get like airborne bacteria. And I was like, whoa, wait, topical? What the F? It was crazy. Anyway, so that's not important. So this is really odd to me that this particular form of burial kind of flip-flops between being legal or not. These days, it's not allowed in certain areas, but the government, I guess, kind of protects particular sacred burial areas, probably not wanting more bodies to wash down rivers if they can help it. You know what I mean? So I just think it's absolutely fascinating that there are so many different types of funeral rites out there. It's crazy.
Yeah, we haven't really touched on a ton of them yet.
No.
So there's a lot more. I mean, I mentioned the Viking one. I just know based off of what I've seen on Game of Thrones, which is not the show Vikings, that at least one character gets the Viking funeral, and it's just another one of those things. It's a good example of it's completely different than anything that I ever knew about, but because I'm familiar with it through television and pop culture, it's something where I'm like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. But when it comes to Sky Burial, I never really watch Bones. It's on the background sometimes. It's not a bad show, but I had no idea that this topic had ever come up, so I've never even heard of it before. But yeah, that is super interesting. I had no idea self-mummification was a thing.
Yeah.
So that one definitely.
But I've definitely heard of that. I mean, I was raised with Buddhist parents and things like that, and I was taken to a temple. We had to sit through different stuff, get taught about a bunch of different stuff. And like the whole thing behind Buddhism is this one person sat under this tree, and all these devils and stuff tried to, I don't know if they're devils, they tried to tempt him with all these different things, and he reached this level of enlightenment, right? He entered nirvana or whatever, and that's I think that's the whole concept behind the self-mummification thing, is like you reach that level. You
move past worldly desires.
Yeah.
In some way, shape, or form, and then you're ready to move on.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, I get Buddhism and Hinduism confused a lot. I know there's like the Noble Eightfold Path, and then there's like the achievement of enlightenment through nirvana, and those are very different things. But it's been a very long time since I've studied either, so it was nice to sort of dabble back into that and be reminded of like what a different but beautiful culture it is. So it's a really good topic.
Other than, getting eaten by vultures.
I mean, yeah, that'll happen. But at the same time,
that'll happen.
It's pretty fucking metal. I'm just saying.
That is pretty metal, dude. Yeah.
It's like, it's one way to like, if you just want to be put back with the earth, it's something that I could see as being an alternative to scattering your ashes.
Yes. And what doesn't get eaten gets back into the soil, you know what I mean? And nurtures whatever's around you. So.
And it's very similar to how literally every other animal has its life end.
Yeah.
It's like put back into the circle of life. And we learn about that as kids. Like,
in The Lion King.
I hate you so fucking much. But yeah, you learn about that when you're younger and like what the circle of life actually is through the Elton John song. And I think a lot of people, when they get older, don't want to necessarily be buried, but look for something else that'll make them feel more connected once they're gone.
Like being turned into a tree.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. We'll go back to the haunted forest thing. So that also works. But yeah, pretty solid stuff, Robin. I think overall this episode is pretty terrifying. Yeah. Wondering if it's going to get demonetized on YouTube or not, too.
It's educational. That's the thing, is that I find it very educational to learn about all these different cultures and not be so, what is the phrase, pigeonholed into like believing one thing. Is that the
kind of? Yeah.
I didn't grow up with a lot of normal English phrases. Okay.
You use the word normal a lot.
I don't know a lot of the typical things you would use to say, like colloquial things that people say. I didn't grow up with a lot of those, so I don't know.
The idioms.
Idioms.
Which is a colloquial metaphor, which we all know because of Archer. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he says it in an episode.
Oh, okay.
Well, I thought you were totally going to remember it, but apparently you've etch-a-sketched Archer. So.
Yeah. No, so, I mean, I like learning about different cultures and different things that they believe in and different things that they do. I don't know how. I randomly picked these two rituals and they ended up involving Buddhist stuff. And I was like, what the French toast? But maybe it's because it's all based in East Asia. And so the religions there's not a lot of variety, right? I don't know. I don't live there.
I mean, those two things are pretty varied between the two of them.
Yeah, right.
Self-mummification and sky burial. I will say, too, the thing that I really appreciate when it comes to learning other people's cultures, even for stuff that's like morbid like this, that might be a little bit scary, it might seem a little bit crazy, is that knowing someone else's culture is such a wonderful thing to do for someone else,
Yeah.
Like, you never know when you're going to have someone in your life that tells you, like, oh, I'm a Buddhist, and then you might find out that person that had someone pass away. And you might not be like, oh, is it going to be a sky burial?
Jesus.
Was it self-mummification?
What if one day you get invited to one?
But at the very least, you start to understand certain parts of their culture and understand like certain things and certain customs. And like Robin said, you might be invited. Like, I had never attended a funeral outside of typical burials or cremations until last year. And it's a very, very different thing that I had like never been a part of. And I will say I was very, very happy to have been educated on some of the things to expect. So it's never a bad thing to just like know a little bit more. And plus, this is
the more you know.
This is super morbid and interesting. And yeah.
I am a morbid person. I follow this mortician on YouTube. I watch a lot of her videos.
I feel like we've really equipped a lot of the folks that listen to our show to make future conversations super awkward with this information.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I really hope you go out there and do that. Go make us proud.
Some spooky nugs.
Yeah, go drop some spooky knowledge nugs on folks and just watch their eyes widen. But yeah, good stuff. If any of you that were listening to this episode, whether it was about curse numbers or death rituals, thought that this related to you in any way, shape, or form, and you wanted to reach out to us, you can absolutely do so. We would love to hear from you. Please email storytime@scaryish.com or go to our website, scaryish.com. Click on Contact Us, fill out that form. It comes directly to us. And you can hit us up on any of our social medias. Facebook is facebook.com/scarishpodcast. Twitter is @scarishpod, and Instagram is @scarishpodcast. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scaryish podcast. Those are monthly donations. Tiers start at $1. At $1, you get ad-free episodes. There's physical merch tiers, things like that as you go up. And if you're not into the monthly subscription, you can do a one-time donation. All donations are absolutely helpful. You can go to coffee, ko-fi.com/scaryish podcast. Thank you so much to everybody who's donated to us over the years. We really couldn't be here without you. All the donations go to upgrading our studio setup, reinvesting into the show, paying for fees like website stuff and all that, and making more merch for you folks. So yeah.
Indeed. Thank you all for supporting us. We sincerely appreciate all of you, and we hope you enjoyed this episode because got weird.
Hashtag got weird.
But hey, I think it was a good episode, and we hope you did as well. And we always love to hear feedback from you, so we hope to hear from you. But that is everything we have for this episode 184, which adds to 13. So Robin, why don't you go ahead and sign us out?
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you folks later. This episode's awkward.